Are you going to pull up the slides?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. My name is Madeline Babb, and I am the Executive Vice President of PreMedCC, a student-led organization created in the fall of 2021. Next slide. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hopes of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging finding guidance and mentorship can be, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Next slide, please. And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone. We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students, people that lack the financial resources, or just those that don't know anyone in the medical field. Next slide. One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home or wherever you may be. We typically have events on most Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you aren't able to attend any of the events, all our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel. Many of our sessions will end with a Q&A with our speakers. Any questions that you have can be put in the Q&A section on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answered. After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today. If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today. Students that attend all of our sessions this school year will receive a PreMedCC Scholar Award for all of the hours of mentorship they have completed. And then yes, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section on Zoom. We're going to use the chat to put helpful links. Also, if you want to stay connected with our upcoming events, or you want to tell your pre-med friends that are studying to get mentorship hours about PreMedCC, all of our social media accounts are at PreMedCC. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand it off to Montserrat to introduce our speaker for today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm introducing Dr. Cesar Padilla. He's a first-generation Mexican-American from Northern California. His parents immigrated from the Mexican state of Jalisco, settling in the East Bay area, Union City, in the 1970s, where they worked in local factories. Cesar would spend every summer in his childhood in Mexico, where his passion and inspiration for becoming a doctor was ignited. Things were much different for Cesar when he returned from his summer trip to Mexico. Growing up surrounded by gang violence in the United States, Cesar almost dropped out of high school at the age of 15. To make up for his failed grades, Cesar attended adult continuation school at the age of 16 and managed to graduate high school on time. After high school, he attended the Ohlone Community College in Fremont, where he heard about and attended his first Summa conference at the age of 19. Dr. Padilla is now a double fellowship trained in Harvard Medical School in critical care medicine and obstetric anesthesiology with additional training in critical care echocardiography. His research interests included care in obstetrics and addressing inequalities in maternal and obstetric care. Dr. Padilla also serves as Chief Medical Education Advisor for Alliance and Mentorship and Me Mentor, a nonprofit organization with a mission of mentoring underrepresented students interested in medicine, and is the co-chair of the inaugural Council of Anesthesiology for the National Hispanic Medical Association. Dr. Padilla is currently a clinical assistant professor at Stanford and hopes to connect, teach, and inspire the next generation of students pursuing medicine.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Okay, do I share my slides now? Excellent. All right, guys. Here, I'm going to share my slides. You all are going to tell me if everything looks good, if I sound good, I want to say thank you so much to everyone here for the warm introduction. And let's take a step back. So first of all, I'm grateful that you all are spending time on a Saturday morning. And I know that the time is valuable, and I'm assuming probably that most everyone here either has an experience being in a community college or perhaps is going through community college now. But if you're not, that's all good. As was mentioned in the introduction, everyone is sort of welcome to join. So the title of my talk is From Community College to Faculty at Stanford School of Medicine. And I really just want you to imagine perhaps the story that I'm going to tell you, which is mine, but imagine sort of yourself navigating the story, meaning the story is going to start before I attended community college. And really the main objective is to inspire you all to understand that there are resources available within the community college network, but also beyond the community college network to help you on your path to pursuing medicine. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end, and happy to answer any questions. So my story really starts with my ancestors. And one of the sort of aspects of being first generation, well, that term gets thrown around a lot, but first generation really entails the fact if you're the first sort of either first generation born here, or you're of the generation that emigrated here. So there's sort of like two sort of definitions to that. So first generation for me was, I was born here. So I was the first generation born in the United States. My parents came from Mexico, as was mentioned in the introduction, from the state of Jalisco. This is what my grandpa did in California. So most of California before Silicon Valley, before Hollywood, it was a lot of farmland. And actually till this day, a lot of people don't know this, but till this day, the number one the number one contributor to the economy in California is agriculture. And I think it's so easy for us to forget that because we see Tesla driving around, Google and Apple and all this stuff. But let's think about the hardworking people who really are working under the sun, literally putting food on our table. And that's what my grandpa was doing when he would come from Mexico and work on the fields in California. And that's what my dad did as well. But it's important to honor the contributions of your ancestors, because that is the strength that we're sort of, that we can draw inspiration upon. On my mother's side, my mother, both of my parents from Mexico. This is my mom when she was a little girl, but it was tough. And another aspect of first generation sort of stories is people are usually escaping economic or political violence. And in this case, in Mexico, it was the economic disparities. It was poverty. My parents had to start working at a young age, and it was just very difficult. It would have been very, very difficult or almost impossible for them to have the resources to have an education. And they did not really have a formal education in Mexico. So the story of first gen is more than a buzzword. It's like our ancestors on our backs, if that makes sense. It's the struggles, it's coming from different countries. In this example of my parents from Mexico, but if you're coming from the Caribbean, or if you're coming from Africa, or if you're coming from any other parts of the world where these disparities perhaps exist. And so I think it's important to set the stage, right? Let's set the stage for first gen, because the community college path is essential for first gen students. So my parents arrived to California. I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area. And this experience, I was born close to Oakland, and my upbringing was shaped through my cultural identity. And it's important to mention, this is sort of mural of Cesar Chavez. There's Cesar Chavez on the left, and this is the United Farm Labor Workers sort of mural of the movement. And it's important to mention this because this is also part of that collective struggle of our ancestors. So for many of you who perhaps are not familiar with Cesar Chavez's contributions, he really was a voice for the underserved, a voice for the working class who was working on the fields in California, and really just gave the community a sense of voice and unity. But that's important because when I was born, when a lot of us, even till this day, our culture, our identity is shaped by the contributions. Our pride is shaped by the contributions of Cesar Chavez, because he literally gave my dad a voice as a farm worker, gave my grandfather a voice as a farm worker. And that's important because once you have a voice, then you can really start to having a voice is essential to believing in yourself. And that's another theme of today's talk is, as a community college student, you actually have a voice. And I hope by the end of the talk, I'll give you some data that will really sort of, what I'm trying to do is just kind of inspire you all that it's not just, oh, I'm just a community college student, I'm just a farm worker. It's like, no, I'm a farm worker with dignity. I'm a community college student with dignity. That's really one of the essential parts of this. So dignity. And I think that's really what the Cesar Chavez movement helped provide us as collectively, as well as immigrants and first generation students. Now, the reality of where I grew up was marred by the socioeconomic realities. And what I mean by that, this is actually a picture of Union City, California, where I was raised. And we had, as I showed you in the previous mural, there was an awesome, great social cultural identity, but there's also realities of being in a poor neighborhood. And one of those realities is violence. So there was a lot of drug and gang violence around this town. Also, if you're familiar with Northern California, Oakland is an area where there's a high poverty rate. There's a lot of gang violence. If you're from LA, it's like, Southeast LA, East LA. And so like I mentioned LA as an example because there's usually a lot of people from Los Angeles on these events. LA is very well represented. Sometimes in the NorCal, we're like kind of a minority, if you will. But so it's like the equivalent of being in East LA versus like West LA. And I remember visiting family when I was that I had in Los Angeles when I was growing up, and I had only really been to East LA, South LA. I had no idea until I did residency at Cedars-Sinai in West LA. I'm like, whoa, this is a completely different universe. Like this is not the same city. And sometimes when you're raised in an area that where there's where it's predominantly poor, as it was in this part of Union City, you don't know any better. And when you don't know any better, you really don't have examples to help lead you. And gang violence is a reality of being in a poor neighborhood. So it was not uncommon for me to, just imagine, right? I told you one of the things to really try to do is imagine yourself walking to high school and seeing gangs and stuff like that. And then your friends start joining gangs. And I never did any of that because I understood how dangerous it was. But it's all around you. And it's hard for you to like disassociate yourself from your friends who you went to middle school with and all of a sudden are joining gangs because they're still your friends, but it's kind of weird. And so a lot of things start happening really quickly. And unfortunately, a lot of first-gen students have one of our common themes is that we're usually come from poor working class neighborhoods where these realities sometimes exist. This is me in high school. So I'm on the right here. I'm on the right. I'm not looking at the camera. Someone snapped the picture. I came across this picture recently. And what struck me was like, whoa, I took a step back. I'm like, we're all wearing red. Well, that's not a coincidence. And I told you earlier, I'm never part of a gang, but if you wore the opposite color blue, you're in trouble. And just imagine, and so we all did this implicitly, like we all did it not purposefully. It was sort of like a survival thing. And none of my friends here were in gangs or anything like that. But I think looking back, what this picture represents to me is the survival instinct that we had, and the fact that the realities of our neighborhood, it was already really affecting our education. So it's devastating is what I'm saying. It's devastating. If you're having to worry about what color to wear, and that's just one of the obstacles, it's going to be tough. But I'm not even touching on the potential drug violence that's around or this and that. So this is just one small example, but just to give you an idea of like the realities of what it's like to be raised in a poor neighborhood. Yeah, that's me. So things started to really, this is the part of the story where there was it got really hard, and there was like a moment of reflection because I stopped going to high school. So that picture was the end of 9th grade. So in the 10th grade, and I stopped going to high school shortly after that. And what kid wouldn't? Why would I go to high school if you're seeing your friends, in gangs, if you're having to worry about what color to wear? I think it's actually the right thing in some ways. It's probably reasonable not to go to high school. Like, why would you want to go? And it was a moment of reflection because this is where the stories and the strength of our ancestors, I think, is really important, because I really started to ask myself, what am I going to do? What's going to be my future? What's going to come ahead for me? And that's where I really started to talk to my parents about their journey, their struggles. And I realized that it would be selfish of me to really let go of this opportunity, because they came from a different country to really give us a good opportunity. And you can imagine, if I were to let that go, I'm almost throwing away their sacrifices. I'm almost throwing away their contributions to my future and to my just to my future and to my and the future of the family as well. And that's important. So I want you to understand that it's not just you. You're part of something greater, and you're part of a lineage, and you have a responsibility to that. And I think it's important, because sometimes in our culture, we can be very individualistic, me, but it's actually a little bit more than that. There's, think about the contributions of those that came before you. And again, I'm talking about this through the lens of first gen students, as more likely to be represented in community colleges. So what do you do when you drop out of high school? So I had to go to a different high school in a different city, and then I had to enroll in adult school. So this is Fremont Adult School in the East Bay, and there is no shame in starting from any level of education. Adult school is basically where you go if you need to make up credits. This is an important part, guys. Like, yeah, I have a Harvard degree, but this is probably more important to me than that. And I seriously mean that, because it's the foundation. So it's all about the steps that you take. It's all about just starting. That's the hardest part, is starting. So I'm at this new high school. I need to make up my grades. So I would go to high school from 7 a.m. till 4. And then at 4 p.m. I would enroll, or 5 p.m. I would enroll in adult school to make up my grades. And then, I just felt like incredible support. And the way I would describe it now is they picked me up, they didn't let me fail, and they believed in me. And then this is where Ohlone College comes in. So of course, when you almost drop out of high school, well, can't really go to a 4-year. As high as your aspirations are, and as high as your motivation is, it's not going to happen. We're going to go to a 4-year. So there's those realities as well. You need to be honest with yourself. So I think it was a 2-point-something GPA when I graduated high school. So I managed to actually pick up my grades quite a bit. And then I attended community college. By this time, I had already really understood that I love medicine. And I left out a part of the story here, which is that I would spend my summers in Mexico. And in Mexico, I was really exposed to, I would say, other parts of, I was exposed to healthcare in different ways, not as a patient or anything, but just experiencing people that worked in healthcare. And it was very inspiring. So I had this inspiration already within me. So here I am at community college. And at this point, I'm like, can I do it? Is it possible? I'm like, a lot of excitement, but a lot of nervousness. And I really didn't know how to take the next steps. But what's really important to highlight is that community college was instrumental coming from a working class household. That's a theme. So let's pick, that's going to be one of the central things. So here I am at community college, and I start running into mentors. And this is the importance of seeking mentors. Seek people who speak to you personally. So this Dr. Santanina Marrero, who is, would look back as an incredible mentor of mine. This is a quote from a book that she wrote. So she says, telling our stories has enabled us to survive and pave the way for others to have their voices heard. It is in coming to terms with our past that we can honor it, learn to love ourselves enough to celebrate the present, and co-create the future where we move beyond survival so we can thrive. That's important, guys, because a lot of times, perhaps we're in a community college setting because we didn't have the grades for whatever life happens. There was the realities of being poor. There's the realities of just something happened where you had to take time off school. You got to go back to community college. And sometimes it's important to share stories with others to move beyond that sort of survival mode so we can thrive and co-create a future. I think these are just wonderful words. Dr. Marrero is a counseling psychologist. And I just think these words just capture something that we need to hear more of. You know, we need to hear more of these stories, and these quotes. Now, before I jump into like the part where it was like how I found the resources that really helped me get to med school, there's no substitute for this. This is it, guys. And this is when I'm mentoring students, there's no substitute for work ethic. You have to put in the work. And there's like that. Like, I just have to say that because yes, there's people around you that want to help. There are community college sort of a pathway track, and I'll mention some of these in a second. But what's the engine is your work ethic. So what did that mean for me? So since I almost dropped out and I went to adult school, I had to learn the value of what daily schedules are. So as I started to be in community college, for example, as I was taking my chemistry courses and more for like the math and science courses, daily schedules are important. You have to meet with counselors. Guys, meet with a counselor and ask them, what can I do now to be like, draw or create a pathway for me that shows me what I need to do in the next 2 years to get to a 4-year, so I could be as a pre-med. That's what you need to do. And I would say like I see a lot of talent that's lost because they don't do that. They sort of go in and they sort of go in, and what happens is they just kind of figure it out on their own. It's like, no, the first day, like, and even before that, before you sign up for classes, knock on doors, find a counselor that is willing to help you. And if there's a counselor you don't really jive with, it's okay, try another counselor and ask the counselor, what can I do? Trust me, there's nothing more that they want than to help you. So that's what I did. I knocked on a door. I was like, okay, I want to go to med school. Okay, this is what you need to do for the next 2 years. And I knew, I was like, okay, so the way I'm going to make that a reality is by making a daily schedule. I've already been with my counselors. And then on a more granular level, flashcards for memorization. Like I had to do a lot of catch up because I didn't have that foundation in science in high school. So I had to do a lot of flashcards, memorize stuff. And also a big part of that is just staying mentally and physically fit. That's important too. Relationships, having a balanced life. No substitute for work ethic. That's important, guys. All right. So mentorship. Guys, there's opportunities now that didn't exist 20 years ago. The virtual world has brought us all together. So there are opportunities for mentorship on national, state, and local level. I'm going to focus on state and local, since I don't know, but I'm assuming that the majority of people here are in California. And if you're not, it's all good. Just tell me where you're from, and you can type it in the chat box. But for purposes, I'm going to be talking about state and local opportunities. So I'm at community college, and I come across this opportunity from Stanford. So here I am, a community college student. I'm putting in the work, and I come across a flyer, and the flyer says this. This flyer says Stanford University Minority Medical Alliance. This is not the flyer, obviously, because this is 2022, but it was 2007, 8. No, 2002, 3. I graduated high school in 2003, so it must have been 2003 or 2004. Wow, it's been a while. That's crazy to think 20 years ago. So I'm walking outside my community college classroom, and I come across a flyer, and it says Summa, and I'm like, this is interesting. And it was an invitation to community college students to go to the Stanford campus and learn about how you can become a doctor. Incredible. All right, now we're talking, because I've put in the work. I was already, by that time I had already, gotten a few A's in chemistry. I was like probably going to get, I've locked down a few good grades. I'm like on a good path. So I show up to Summa. What is Summa? So Summa is a coalition of Stanford Medical student groups that are representative of different diverse groups that you can see here. And it's been going on for 31 years. And this is the good part about Summa, about these pre-medical conferences that you all should be looking. So if you're in Southern California, look up pre-medical conferences. If you're in the Bay Area, this is the one you want to go to. But there's a lot of pre-medical conferences. But what happened when I showed up is like, I had all this energy and stuff, and I never forget this. I'm at the registration booth, and then I meet a doctor there, Dr. Ron Garcia. And Ron Garcia, he just looks at me. He's like, "Hey, where are you from?" "Oh, from Union City Community College." He goes, and he just like reminded me of like my uncle at like a carne asada barbecue. And I'm like, whoa. First of all, I'd never been on the Stanford campus. Second of all, I never thought I would feel like, I feel so intimidated. So I never thought I would feel welcomed. It was incredible. I was like, what? Like, okay, now I felt comfortable. I felt like I belonged. That's another important thing, is you belong in medicine, no matter your background, no matter where you come from, you belong in medicine. You have the drive and the passion, you belong in medicine. So I'm at this conference, and what they teach is really the value of how, and the importance of how you can put together a competitive medical school application. So if you come from a community college, there's value in you coming from a community college. And I'll touch on the more sort of the statistical value of that, what that means. But they also go through things like financial aid, school and life balance. We need help, guys, especially if you're coming from a community college. It's very difficult sometimes to navigate the system. So do not do this alone. If you've noticed, I'm touching on a theme here: counselors, family, your ancestors, all that stuff matters, and pre-med infrastructure. So yeah, and one of the themes here is community college as well for Summa. So Summa happens every year, usually like in the early part of the year, January or February. And I would just highly encourage you guys to look this up. It's been virtual, but this last event we had over 1,000 people like show up. It's incredible. It really is. But it's not just the Summa conference. The Office of Diversity in Medical Education at Stanford has programs that are specifically aimed to community college students. So this is a pre-medical program for community college students. And actually, let me go back to this one. So you can actually just Google this, and you can see sort of programs that are available. They usually happen in the summer. If the application cycle is done, then you just obviously you could just read the information to be prepared for the upcoming one. But the point of me showing you this is that we are intentional about community college sort of applicants. It was much more difficult to find these resources when I was a med student, or when I was back a community college student. This is another program I want to put a plug for: leadership education for aspiring physicians. Solep is specifically for Bay Area pre-medical students looking for leadership while improving community health and wellness. So it's sort of looking for kids from local communities, for students from local communities that are really sort of passionate about improving health outcomes in a community. I'm going to start to introduce another theme here, which is community health, and you'll see me touch on this, but there's an important part of being a community college student and community health. So there's a link there. So it's not a coincidence that, for example, Stanford and other medical institutions are being proactive and intentional about community college students. There's actually it's strategic for this for community health as well. So what LEAP does, it's a pre-health professional development course. You basically train with local leaders at Stanford. You get advised regarding medical school preparation, and you get a certification of participation upon successful completion. It's important, guys, as you're on your path, you want to be around as many doctors and as many professionals as you can, because you need to know the sort of beyond how to put together an application. it's never too early for you to sort of just to understand the, okay, sometimes the culture, for example, like, how you say things in an academic way. So like an example is, sometimes like replying to an email in a professional manner. Like you want to work out these kinks early, and you want to sort of be used to being around professionals early to sort of help you mature early. So it's not like, oh, I'm a community college student, I'm going to worry about med school later. That's not the right approach. The right approach is, I'm a community college student. I need to take advantage of all the opportunities I have now to learn about the medical education sort of culture, opportunities that are available for me now. I need to do this now. And what the good thing is that you'll get to know people as well that will invest in you. So it's beyond just advising you for med school preparation, it's practical skills as well. So this term right here, practical skills, is a pretty non-specific term, right? Not, practical skills that you're going to use throughout your academic and professional career. This is more than just something in a work setting. This can be something more that takes on a more social, developmental, psychological sort of role. And what's really cool is we'll plug you in, and you can, conduct sort of surveys, needs of the communities. I love this. I don't think this program was around back in the early 2000s, but activism and advocacy as writers and professionals. So there's one skill, guys, as a community college student, is writing. Learn how to write. Easiest way to learn how to write is read a lot. Read, write, because writing is formalized critical thinking. And if you can think critically, you can really maneuver yourself through a large amount of obstacles. And it's important, especially as you're on your path for medical education. Ethics and professionalism. I touched on that earlier. That's what I was mentioning, the way to conduct yourself, the way that you're going to respond to an email. These little things you want to learn early on. Trust me, you do. Okay, now we're going to get a little, if you're not in the Bay Area, it's all good. Let's say you're in Southern California. Let's say you're in Georgia even. Let's say you're in, I think Mi Mentor it's in several other states. I have to look this up. We're rapidly expanding. So there's an organization called Mi Mentor, Alliance of Mentorship. It's a 13,000 member organization. And this organization it's a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to mentoring first generation students from underserved backgrounds. So that's really the key. If you're from a poor sort of upbringing, if you sort of struggle with resources, this is the nonprofit for you. And one of the strategic aims is to also highlight the importance of mentoring community college students naturally. So I work for Mi Mentor as one of their chief medical education advisors. So I sort of helped them with some of the events. Over 13,000 members. If you're on IG, Instagram, you want to join them. Over 8,000 followers. They have 2 boards. We have a physician run board. I'm part of that, and then they have a student run board. So if you want to get plugged in as a community college student to a great organization and perhaps help contribute and get your name, because this is important work too for you to sort of build your CV. This is it. So you want to be part of Mi Mentor. Rapidly expanding. Over 400 events have been hosted since 2016. So you're like, okay, you have this nonprofit, but what does that mean for a community college student? Like, what is that? How do you translate that into concrete sort of steps for me to get into med school? This is it. This is one of the brilliant parts of the CEO's vision, Dr. Efrain, or former CEO, Efrain Talamantes, the current CEO, Dr. Consuelo Casillas. So Mi Mentor has sort of their own post-bac program called the Medical School Readiness Program that I believe is free. Yes, you apply. Yeah, actually, I know it's free. So the MSR program is designed for low-income, first-gen students from poor neighborhoods, as I mentioned before. But what this program does, it's a 12-month program. There we go, for UIM students and the represented students. statewide across California that really sort of build upon these themes of community building and support for students. So this is also similar to what the LEAP program does as well. It's bi-monthly, monthly meetings. It's really set to empower you to work on skills, knowledge, and social capital. Again, guys, you're not in this alone. Community building among students, culturally relevant speakers are invited. And it's really to strengthen your voice to create a compelling narrative that really highlights your experiences. So when you apply to med school, you have a higher chance of getting accepted. All right. And this is really interesting fascinating data that shows that the national cohort, so here's the people who apply to med school, there was a 41% acceptance rate. So that's about right. And when I was applying to med school, it was about half. And the MSR cohort students they've been above the national average. And the 2018 class, wow, 93%, incredible. And as far as I know, the previous classes have also been above the national average as well. So this is what you want. You want to do everything possible to maximize your community around you, because you're not in this alone. Because you're also, like, one of the hard things as a student, a community college student too, is like sometimes as first generation, we're very like industrious, do things on my own, and I'm just gonna out hustle, but that's only going to take you so far. You need people to help sort of point out potential weaknesses in your applications or potential weaknesses in your strategy. You need that. And I needed that. And that's where programs like MSR, you're going to be around a lot of other students that perhaps also share your narrative as well. Yeah, some more data. The 2018 cohort, 93% acceptance rate, 28 students matriculated over of the Hispanic Latinx students, over double the national Latinx acceptance rate. And then what I was going to mention here. Okay, so yeah, and then at that cohort, about a third is going to apply to the future. So those that applied in 2018, that was the acceptance rate. All right. I think this is really inspiring, that if you look at the impact of current medical school matriculants in the US, 11% of Hispanic Latinx come from this program. And, but again, this is open to everyone. It's not just, for purposes of this statistic, I have previously presented this at the National Hispanic Medical Association, which is that's why we're highlighting the Latinx population, but it's not specific to Hispanic Latinx. We have Black students, we have Southeast Asian students, we have students from all different backgrounds. This is just for purposes of a recent talk that I gave, but these are, again, some of the topics that we help with: knowledge, networking, mentorship. Okay, so now's the fun part. So why community college? So I hope that what I've done so far is I've shown you, like, okay, this is how you can do it. But why does it matter? Why should you feel empowered if you come from a community college? This is fascinating. So this is a study from 2014 this is actually the CEO of Mi Mentor. What he found was that medical students who attended community college are more likely to serve in poor communities. This is very important, guys. So if you're trying to understand how we can solve disparities, the answer is probably in the community, in community college students. So this is showing data from AAMC, so the American Association of American Medical Colleges, that found that one-third of medical students that attend a community college during their pre-medical experience, or total, one-third attend community college. In addition, this sort of serves as an important tool pathway for underrepresented, minority, and socially disadvantaged students as well. And then more recently, in 2018, it was also found that that community college students were, not only are they more likely to serve in sort of avenues of medicine where they're going to serve back to the community, but that the cohort's very diverse. So look at this, guys. So 30% of the students Asian, 50% Latino, 32% Black or African American that attended community colleges of these physicians. So of these physicians who attended community colleges, that was the breakdown. So what does that tell you? Well, it's important because at this time, about 13%, this latest figures, 13% of US physicians are Black or Latino. And I'm just showing you numbers of 50% and almost 80%, this cohort being Black or Latino. This is important when you consider the need to sort of create pathway programs for underrepresented students. And they consider a city like LA and Los Angeles, almost half of the city is Latino there. That's important, right? Or if we jump to the East Coast, there are a lot of cities that are in highly dense sort of Black communities as well. And although this program is in California, it's important to highlight the fact that community colleges are a vital lifeline for socially disadvantaged, usually poor minority students. So what I'm showing you guys is data that shows that community college pathways, that community college is an essential pathway, an essential resource for poor students. But where does that come into modern health? This part of the talk is more of the future. So now what does the future hold for you? So if you're a community college student, you actually probably have more value to the medical system than if you are, than perhaps if you're at an elite school. Why? Well, I'm going to tell you why. So the AAMC, we all know this, racism has been sort of declared a public health crisis. And unfortunately, racism in healthcare and racial disparities exist. So Black, Hispanic, Native and Indigenous populations are more likely to suffer worse health outcomes related to various aspects of health. And this has been a problem that's come to the forefront of our medical leaders. So the AAMC that I quoted earlier in that study, this is from their website. So they're actively saying, okay, this is a problem. So we have a problem in medicine. So if we have a problem in medicine, then what are the solutions to help solve these problems in medicine? So the accreditation for American accreditation for colleges and graduate medical education right here. So this is what I have. So the ACGME sort of writes the rules of medical school education, and they recently, or they sort of have revised their sort of structure of qualifications for medical education, basically. Like if you're going to, basically all the rules that the medical schools get, they get from the ACGME. That's the easiest way to sort of see it. But they've released sort of statements and data looking at workforce diversity. So what they have said is, for example, in this slide that I have, they said, quote, workforce diversity matters to the elimination of healthcare disparities. Quote, educating physicians who are more likely to serve in underserved areas or with underserved patients in minority communities increases healthcare access, improves trust, communication, and outcomes for those at risk of healthcare disparities. This was recently presented at the National Hispanic Medical Association conference a few weeks ago. So I'm just telling you, if we have a problem and the majority of poor, disadvantaged students or large cohort are in community colleges, and the people that write the rules are saying that we need to train a more diverse workforce, then the answer couldn't be any more clear. The answer is simply within our community colleges. And this is a slide that I sort of took a picture of. This, again, ACGME 2022 presented at the conference, that there's benefits to a more diverse workforce because and the term is racially concordant care, meaning if you're a patient that's Black, you're more likely to have a better healthcare outcome if your physician is also Black. Simply put, we need more doctors that are reflective of the communities, and that innately makes sense. As the ACGME has said, that there's benefits for this. So improving access for individuals, this would improve access for individuals who would rather perhaps not receive help in an environment that historically has felt that, where patients feel dehumanized or discriminated against. So this is from the ACGME, again, the people that write the rules for medical school education. So what are the next steps? I'm basically putting it all out. Say the problem: lack of representation in medical schools, disparities in medicine. The people that write the rules are saying that. The solutions are in diversifying the healthcare workforce. That the people that write the rules for medical school. What are the resources? The resources are, we presented this resource, PreMedCC. Mi Mentor, as I mentioned, Mi Mentor, active 13,000 member organization involved, with the MSR program, Summa, and their programs, and other respective programs. So what are the next steps? The next steps are natural to work to establish a formal community college to medical school sort of program pathways. So the future is this, guys. The future is organizations like the ones that you all are logged into today, hearing. Nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to this mission, getting involved with them early with your counselors as well. The answer is also going to have to come from the AMC, because they themselves have also said this is a problem. And the people that write the rules, for medical education. So really the next steps I envision, this is probably more towards, this part of the talk is more towards the leaders at PreMedCC, is it's time. It's time for a formal pathway. It's time to promote and to help our leaders see that community college students are an answer for addressing workforce or for addressing healthcare disparities and for diversifying our workforce. The answer is there, and the work from Dr. Talamantes has shown that, and the nonprofit organizations like Mi Mentor have shown that. So what we have to do is mobilize for next steps, because I think we can now move beyond we have a problem to these are the solutions for the future. And so I would encourage leaders of PreMedCC to reach out to Mi Mentor and to perhaps write a letter or call to action to AAMC or to the ACGME to say, let's do a pilot program. Let's do a program where community college students, if you attend and you do this, you get automatic acceptance to medical school. Why not? Programs like that exist in other parts of the country historically, but make it more intentional for community college students, because those students are more likely to work in poor neighborhoods. That's important for reducing healthcare disparities, as pointed out by the ACGME. So we need to really get on the same page with the people writing the rules, is what I'm saying. Now, if you're a community college student here, this should all make you feel empowered, because the answer is within you. I'm telling you, like, everything that is said here is shaped around the soul of, like, you have, or the ethics that you, the soul and ethics that you have the answer within you. Like, there's a moral sort of obligation to get community college students to become doctors now. That's what we're pointing out. It's the right thing to do. So history's on your side. This really wasn't the narrative that existed when I was a community college student. It was kind of like, it felt like you were at a more of a disadvantage if you were a community college student. But what has happened now, what I hope, is that we can help spread this narrative to empower community college students, but not only that, but to set forward the framework for change. And the only way that's going to happen is by all of us working together. And never forget the power of your ancestors. It's really, you're part of something bigger. Think about the lineage that came before you. And I think I love quotes. This is Carl Jung. He's one of the founders of analytical psychology. He says, inner peace and contentment depend in large part whether or not your historical family, which is inherent in the individual, can be harmonized with the conditions of the present. Meaning, you really need to honor the contributions of those who came before you, or acknowledge them, to really understand the present. well. So who am I on this journey? Who am I? Am I this Harvard trained doctor? Am I whatever, like, you know, what are my part of these titles? No. What I am is I'm an adult school graduate who really took advantage of resources at the community college. And yeah, I ended up going to Stanford, or, you know, after graduating from Harvard. But I'm sort of proof that, you know, I'm here, you know, we are on a Saturday morning talking to, you know, about the importance of community college. And I think the only reason why is because I went to community college myself. So it's really the importance of highlighting and to understand your own worth and value as a community college student, that the answers are within you to help address some of the most important healthcare problems that we have. And that is it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stop sharing. Sorry, Montserrat, I think this is the Q&A part, but if you guys want to moderate the questions, you guys can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, so if you guys have questions, type them away. Because if you don't have any questions, Dr. Padilla can go and spend time with his family.
Well, man, you know, at the end, I get so passionate about these things because I feel like we need to spread this message more. Like, I just can't believe, like, this should be, in my opinion, like, there should be more articles written about this. So, anyways, yeah, I can talk about this forever, but. All right, question. I see, actually, I see Q&A. Oh, okay, here we go. How can I join programs he mentioned? MeMentor.org. So yes, I see that. So type it in, MeMentor.org, look it up, MSR programs. MeMentor has an app, actually. They have an app that you can put on your phone and stuff, like, yeah, because that's what apps do, they're on your phone. Look up Summa, register for the Summa, look up the LEAP program. I don't know when the cycle ends. It's on your fingertips. It's literally there. And then I don't know beyond, you know, that's a Bay Area program or California, but I don't know beyond that, like, where else, you know, what other programs.
We put the links in there.
Perfect. Okay. How was so it says, do these programs work for psych majors? Absolutely. Absolutely. So you could be an art major. You could be an art major and go to med school. I had a friend, a good friend of mine was an art major. You just have to do your prereqs. So you have to do your chemistry, biology, like your basic pre-med requirements, but you can do anything. Like, you can really have any background. That being said, it is a bit more of a difficult transition sometimes. In terms, like, a lot of the tests that you take for your licensing exams in medical school are science-based. So you just have to be aware of that. Like, if you study, I had a good friend of mine that did religious studies in undergrad, and it was a little bit harder for him to get down those, like, biochemistry, you know, topics. But because I was a biology major. Most doctors are biology majors. At least that's the latest data that I remember. I think it's like 70% or like biology or something related to biology, and that sort of prepares you for med school a little bit. But it doesn't mean that you can't do anything else. So can you do psych? Yeah. Okay. How was your transition from community college to Harvard? Well, it was community college to, like, so what I did is, from community college, I went to the University of San Francisco. So USF, that's where I finished my undergrad. From undergrad, I went to medical school in New York. And that's another thing I didn't mention here, is that be prepared. Part of your path in medicine, you may have to go to a different state. That's okay. And that can be hard sometimes for families that sometimes may not understand that. But in the long run, it's your future, and sometimes also the future of your family. But from there, then I did residency in LA. And then from LA, I went to Harvard. So it wasn't like one step, it was like multiple steps that got me there. And then right now I work at Stanford, but my transition was great. It was great. I would say, like, the best, the thing that's going to sustain you in medicine is hard work. and in your ethics. And I felt like I already had that coming from a working class environment. Like I started working when I was 16, 17. And that's really what's going to sustain you in terms of the long hours and stuff like that. The hard part was the academic part, just sitting down and, the part of like doing your licensing exams and just learning it. I would say it's a balance, because a lot of what we do is based off just the manual labor, actually. And I would probably make the argument that a lot of community college students are probably thrive even more in medicine in that environment. But you just have to knock out you have to do these more formal, sort of examination kind of things. And that's, I think, is the hard part, because a lot of the exams are sort of tailored towards native English speakers. And unfortunately, an exam is not going to predict what type of doctor you're going to be. We know that. So the MCAT, it's not going to predict what type of, how good of a doctor you're going to be, but you still need to do it. So what I tell students is like, you need to, like, that's the hard part. The hard part is like an exam like the MCAT, because it can be so foreign to someone from a working class environment. So what I tell students is start early. So right now I'm mentoring a student who grew up in East LA, poor parents, immigrants, and he's recently graduated. And I told him from the beginning, I was like, you have to study now. So we came up with a plan, and he's scoring like 98th percentile on the MCAT on his practice exams. 98th percentile. I think he's actually taking his MCAT today. But the only reason he's doing that is because I was on him. I'm like, you need to be now, that sense of urgency. And I know it's not going to predict what type of doctor he's going to be, but I also know that he's much, 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 much more likely to get into a med school if he aces that. So that's the power of doing well on an exam. Again, I'm not for exams like that, but you got to also play the game. That's important. Does Mi Mentor also provide mentorship for international students? Yeah, you can totally. Oh, Mi Mentor, I think so. Yeah, and they have not only international, but for like undocumented, they have resources for undocumented students that I've seen online. Does Summa provide mentorship opportunities? Summa, yes. And the mentorship opportunities, for example, like for the last Summa event, you log in and then you can go to different breakout rooms. So if you want to go to a breakout room, like learning how to write a personal statement, you go to that part. Learning how to do an effective interview, you go to that part. But what you can do there is someone drops their email, just like go ahead and reach out to them, Yes, like DACA recipients, any programs you know about. Specifically, I know that there's a program at Mi Mentor, and I've seen it highlighted, but I don't have that information off the top of my head. You would have to look at that. But yes, for DACA recipients, yes, I have seen that.
So what I would say to DACA recipients as well is don't ask for permission unless they ask for. I think the only thing is if certain research programs, if they're paying you through federal grants, you need to have Social Security, but there's a lot of programs that don't. So like a program for Mi Mentor, or even here, like we don't ask for your status. So like, you don't need to provide that information. But also, I know somebody who was a DACA recipient who applied to a research program, got accepted, and then when they were accepted, they couldn't get paid, and so the person who was the PI found a way to provide funding for that person for the summer. So I would say don't exclude yourself at the beginning. Wait until you get accepted and then have them reject you from that end of it. And if they really want you, they will find a way to support you.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes well, you're going to get told no a lot, and you have to advocate for yourself and be creative. A great story is a colleague of mine. So his name is Dr. Michael Galvez. He's a hand surgeon here in California, and I think he's actually the only Latino hand surgeon in the state of California, or probably in the US. It's incredible. It's very difficult to become a hand surgeon. You have to do like a lot of years of training. Anyways, so you have a super subspecialized physician. He went to community college, but here's the aspect of the story that I want you to listen to, or to remember. He applied to Stanford. He didn't get in. So he got his rejection letter. You know what he did? He wrote back. He said, in, I'm sure, a very elegant way, but very also firm way, I would ask the Stanford admissions office to strongly reconsider. I'm very passionate, And he was right. He was right, because guys, what I'm telling you, I'm showing you the data. So if he comes from a community college student, if he comes from community college, is he more likely to work in an underserved area? Well, he's a hand surgeon and he works in an underserved area. So he's literally fixing like hands of kids in California. And even though he didn't get into Stanford, he wrote an appeal letter, and that's how he got in. So basically, he got the rejection letter, wrote an appeal letter, sent it in, and they granted him an interview. So sometimes doing things creatively like that, you just have to find ways. So if someone tells you no, you have to, and you're doing the work yourself. It's not a substitute for your work. If you're doing the work yourself, you're diligent, you're doing all that stuff on your own, then you can always sort of appeal, ask for help. And as was mentioned, if you, in terms of undocumented status, like just there are people there. It's a matter of knocking on doors. It really is. And by no means am I sort of I know the legal challenges are just not the same, but asking is, and sort of finding your own way is sometimes the only path. And that story from Dr. Galvez is like an example.
Yeah, Michael actually, Dr. Chavez spoke here last year.
Did he share that part of it, the story?
Yeah, he also got
he
also got his med school paid for too. So California has a scholarship that if when you're done with your training, if you go in an underserved area, they'll pay your medical school debt up to $300,000. So he actually got all his debt paid off because he is working in Central Valley at Valley, and so he got his home med school paid for. So
it's a great story. It's a great story. And
he's a friend of mine. So he's very interesting character, that's for sure.
We have such similar paths. We're both East Bay, California. We both grew up very similar. And I remember, I got to tell the story. So I go to the Summa conference. It was like the second year I go to Summa conference, and I show up, and here I am. And by this time, Michael Galvez is he's a medical student at Stanford. So I show up to the Summa conference, and I hear this student gets up. He's like, "Hi, I'm Michael Galvez," and I'm like, "Okay." And he starts rapping. Like he's he does this whole rap, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, it's the Stanford's cool." You got this Latino kid from the East Bay who went from community college. I'm like, I can identify with this kid, I because our paths are so similar. And it's crazy because I ended up doing 2 fellowships too. You know what I mean? Like we just ended up you take a look back and you kind of can't help but wonder, is a lot of our outlook in medicine because we came from community college, because we come from this experience? And I think it is. It really is.
Did he do dancing too? Because
I think he used to break dance.
Yeah,
he used to break dance, but that time he just did his little raps, his little freestyle or whatever.
Yeah, he's a break dancer too, and that's how I always tell him that's how he conned his wife to marry him.
Wait, what happened?
He break dances, and I always tell him that's how he conned his wife to marry him.
Oh my God, yeah. There's a question: how did you pay for college tuition at Harvard? So I took student loans. That was, my. I had part of my med school paid for, not all of it. But sometimes you don't know what you don't ask, and in retrospect, I probably should have asked more. So look, that's a mistake I probably made. But I think it just follow on the theme of what I presented today. Ask questions, be part of a community, be part of a network, and things will get better for you. So paying for college, in this country, unfortunately, school is expensive and student loans are a reality. There's just sometimes no substitute for that, but there are programs and there are people. The more you ask, I believe, the more that you're likely you are to probably run across a scholarship or run across a program like was mentioned with Dr. Galvez that can help you. But I paid for with student loans, still paying them off.
But you're not starving.
No, porfa, no, not at all. Look, so I think it's important to mention this. So school is expensive, and then as a resident, you're not making a lot of money, and so my loans were on deferment during that period. So it's not like you have to pay them while you're working as a resident. That would have been very stressful. Like imagine me working all these crazy hours as a resident, paying them back. So even while I was a resident, and when I was at Harvard, I didn't have to pay that back. So I focused on my studies because I knew the number one thing was to focus on my studies. Because all that hard work is going to go away if you don't get that certificate in the end. And that's why I was really mentioning the power of you have to put in the work. There's no substitute for that. And someone like Michael Galvez, like I think I really identify with him because he says the same thing too. He's really diligent about work, and he's always, there's no substitute for that, and that's important. But there are ways, even in a system that's expensive, there are ways where you can sort of, put your loans on deferment, ask for help, things like that.
My question is, this is a topic that comes quite a bit. Actually, this is the one thing I was going to add too is, the big problem is that if you don't come from money and you feel that you're taking out debt to pay for your education, most people in this country, on average, California at least, you make between $80,000 to $100,000. You end up taking out a loan to buy a house, which is $500,000-$600,000. Where in medicine, you're taking out maybe $200,000 loan out, and average physician in California makes $200,000 a year. So it is an investment that you're taking out for something that you're gonna have earning potential. That's doctors are paid well. They're not. I mean, compared to like Silicon Valley VC and tech executives, we're all poor, but at the end of it, you make that, you make a living, and you're able to, own a home and have a car and go on a vacation here and there. So, and I think that's the big challenge is most people don't come from money, fear that, but there should be no fear.
Yeah, life's a risk, right? And there's fear the other way too. There's fear if you don't do it, if you don't take the risk, because in my opinion, a life of regret is probably worse. And I think it's important to say that because the opportunities that you have in this country do not exist in other places. And I don't think that's told enough. As unfair as some resources may be, there still are opportunities. Like the community college system, guys, that is huge. That does not exist like in Mexico, where my parents are from. No, like as far as I know, like that system is not an established system. It's like it's hard. And that's why it's important to sort of just take advantage of the resources that are around you. And it is a risk, and it's not always guaranteed, but I really believe with hard work, diligence, and the right resources around you, you can make it happen.
Yeah. The other question I was going to have, and this is actually comes up in a lot of other sessions, how did you taught yourself those skills to study, being a good study person, studying for
Yeah,
various things?
yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the way that I taught myself was there's a word that comes to mind. It's a Spanish word, which is terco. Era bien terco, stubborn. I was just stubborn, and I think it's a personality thing. And I just really wanted to understand things. And like, so when I started like a class, for example, let's say it's like chemistry, I just felt very like why can't I learn this? If another student can learn it, I don't know, we're both human beings. We both got the same, set of brain between our ears. Why can't I learn it? So I would do everything possible to understand information. And the way that translated for me is by doing flashcards. So like, for example, if we're on chapter 1 of chemistry, I just made flashcards, and like I want to know everything, like just to memorize it. And flashcards is good because it's rote memorization. So I'm like, oh, that's what a covalent bond is. I still remember that stuff today. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, that's what this is. And so you have to build a strong foundation early. And then I probably did a lot more flashcards than my counterparts, but I felt like that was a big part of my study habits. And then another thing too is like you have to like I treated it like my job. It was like that's my job. That's my, like when I was studying for my exams, like my licensing exams, like okay, so I was probably spending 8 hours a day at a coffee shop doing it. And I wanted to, because I wanted to know the information, and I'm like, I want to prove it. So I think a lot of it was probably having a chip on my shoulder too, because I'm like, okay, yeah, I came from community college, but I'm going to prove, and I'm going to prove that I could do it, prove that I belong. So maybe a little bit of that, like having a chip on your shoulder, being stubborn. Maybe the stubbornness was because of that. I'm like, no, I'm going to prove that I belong. And then once you get to med school, you look around and you're like, whoa, the majority of the people here come from rich households. And there's data to show that 2/3 of medical students come from the top 2 socioeconomic quintiles of income. And then you realize you actually have something more valuable. You have that grit, and you have that hard work, and you have that diligence. So while they're like, oh, I got to study for, complaining, I got to study for this. And then let alone when they start going to rotations and start working in the hospital, I'm like, vámonos, let's go. I'm used to this, dude. I'm like, and then you see the difference. And that's why I think community college students actually probably out succeed. I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up doing 2 fellowships, like Michael Chavez did 2 fellowships, because we had that already in us, like that like, wanting to prove, wanting to just grind and work hard and do all this stuff because of our background. But if I had been raised in a wealthy environment and maybe perhaps not had that struggle, I don't think it would have happened. So in the beginning, it may be harder, but I think in the long run, it's helped me more. And I know it's a really long way of circumventing your answer, but just to get back to it, I think it was just like stubbornness and just wanting to know information. And at the granular level, what that meant was knowing everything possible through flashcards in the beginning, but building a really, really strong foundation for a work ethic. And that you see the differences in that when you get to med school. You'll see the work pay off, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
I have a follow-up question for that. I recently visited Colombia, and I kind of felt that as well. Like I got to go to a basketball game and look at all that. And I guess I definitely did feel that energy, even though like in just talking to like the students and stuff, it's definitely a very different background because I come from a similar background as you. So definitely like that stubbornness, your parents working, coming from like that lower class, and then you see them work hard. Like when I remember when I was like really little and they would like suffer through a lot of things. And then like as I've grown, they've also grown. So it's kind of cool to like grow together. But I definitely felt like that same like presence. I don't know how to really explain it because I don't go there, and even now at community college everyone's so diverse. But I kind of want to ask, like, how did you deal with that? Or like when majority of people are from wealthy backgrounds, did you feel like any inferiority, and then it became like, oh no, this is actually a strength? Or was it always a strength for you? Like, how did you kind of process that?
Yeah, that's a great point, most of that. So I think sometimes it's hard. I think in Spanish. So one term that comes to mind is coraje, like tenía coraje. So how would you translate that? You guys help me.
I would say like maybe like anger, like
Yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of anger because
It's righteous anger.
yeah, it's
righteous
like right
anger.
because I felt like, why is it harder? Like I was upset, I was angry. Yeah, righteous anger. Why is it that I felt excluded? That's what it was. Yeah, I felt excluded. Like, why is it that I feel excluded in a community college? Like, why is it what? And then why is it that the only doctors that I'm seeing don't look like me or don't come from my environment? And so that motivated me because that also added to that chip on my shoulder, wanted to prove, which is maybe not always the most healthiest way of approaching things, but it definitely gave me motivation. So what happened was when I went to med school, there was our class was 104 students, 104. I was the only Mexican in the class, the only one. So I had it was hard. I was like, whoa, okay. But then it fueled me. I'm like, nah, if I'm going to make the most out of that one seat, like, let's go. I'm going to like, and so you feel like maybe you're part of something bigger too, because you are part of something bigger. You have people behind you that you're motivating. You have people that are looking up to you, and you're going to open doors one day for people. So I would say a good way of approaching that is by sort of putting it into context that it's not just you as an individual, it's you as part of something bigger. And whether it's in a lineage, familial, ancestral point, or within a community, you're a node, you're a central node. Like, your positivity and your change, it's going to create ripple effects. And that's the power of change. And I do believe in that. I do believe in that positivity, in that change. And I do think that, and I see it all the time. I see like when we, for example, when we bring it, like I do a lot of mentorship, like curriculums, and I highlight a lot of like, very intentional about highlighting women voices and minority voices. So like when I bring in like a Black physician to talk, I notice right away, I get a bunch of Black women, medical or like students asking questions, right? That's the power of being intentional. That's what we want. We need to highlight, like we need to create a workforce that is reflective of our communities, because here's the reality. And this is what I understand now that I didn't understand when I was a pre-med. But what I see now is this. So I go to work at Stanford, and I work on labor and delivery. So a lot of our work is in obstetrics. The majority of our poor patients are Latino, Spanish speaking. And I'm the only person in my department that's qualified as a bilingual staff in Spanish. So what does that tell you? So right there, that's all that fire and all that anger just got turned into it was validated because it was needed. Like, this is what was needed. Like, I see it now. I'm like, wow. And when you're able to connect with the patient, and I take care of patients from all different backgrounds, but the value of having, as the ACGME data shows, the value of having the diverse physician workforce, it's more than just diversity on a checkbox. It's the fact that you're actually training doctors that are reflective of your communities. We need that. So just tell yourself that, we need you at the end of this journey, and your patients need you. when you have a patient that's scared and they see that you perhaps, can identify with them, and you're going to make a difference in that patient's experience. So, it was a lot of imposter syndrome, but I think I turned that on its head into like, well, I'm going to make it happen, and vámonos. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, no, I love that, because even my major, like I'm majoring in engineering, so even then there's like already less women, and like just being of like, whoa, like I went and I came back and I was like, in Southern California and in my high school was like really diverse. There's a lot of Mexicans everywhere, like, and then I went over there and I was like, where are the Mexicans? Why is there no Mexicans? It was just like culture shock, and I like to this day, like just that feeling has stuck with me, and it's just like I can't even like express like what it made me feel. I was just like, this is insane. Like, why is there no one here?
Write it down. Well, let me ask you, what did it make you feel?
I mean, it was like, I don't know, because it's somewhere I want to go. Like, I ultimately want to go to like transfer, but I can't. It was just weird. Like, more than anything, it was like unsettling, because I was so used to like being surrounded by like Hispanic people, Mexican people, and but like, I don't know.
And this is in New York, right? And this is in New York?
Yeah, in New York.
Yeah. And guess what? And did you know that like in boroughs like Queens and Brooklyn, Mexicans now outnumber Puerto Ricans?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the problem. We're not telling this information enough. Like, so what happens is that the doctors that are graduating are not reflective of communities. And so like, that's just an example, right? But like, it also like in Baltimore, just, huge Black population, like we really need to start investing in pathway programs to educate children from those communities so they're reflective. Yeah, so in New York, I met a student from Queens who's a pediatric resident, Marilisa, who parents are from Mexico, and she's telling me exactly what you're saying. She's a student in New York, and she's like, I don't like, all the patients that I treat are like, the majority are poor minorities, and there's not many people that look like them in medicine. So what you're saying is validated in the experience of doctors.
The 4 out of 5 boroughs in New York are all non-white, majority non-white. Bronx is actually, I think, 60% is, Latin, from both Puerto Rico and South America. And but the thing is, like, places like Columbia, Stanford, all of these places were not created for poor and non-whites. I mean, that's why the SAT exists, for that same reason. Although, California, you see in the CSU, the SAT is going away. But again, those institutions were never meant for brown and poor people. So, and they're created to keep them out in a way.
Well, I think there's a lot of changes happening too. There's a lot of people within, like, Dr. Felipe Perez, who is Associate Dean of Diversity at Stanford. Like, there's definitely like active efforts and stuff. But yeah, there's no question that, just historically, the challenges that keep us out is like primarily the cost. So, for example, we know that the SAT favors, there's affirmative action for rich, privileged people. So the SATs and the standardized scores actually favor rich people. So that is a form of affirmative action, if you want to flip the argument on its head. But unfortunately, that narrative is not told enough, So yeah, unfortunately, usually rich Ivy Leagues favor, students. But, and I want to mention the change, because I think the incoming medical school class was 30-something% underrepresented minority at Stanford. So there's efforts underway. I know, and I'm proud of to say that, I've seen that change in action too. So ahí vamos.
The other question I have is, how have you, and I think that some people have managed family and personal through your journey from Ohlone to now?
Yeah, so I had a family early on, got married before med school, and I would say it's a balance. You know, am I more on the work? You know, I would describe myself as a very industrious person. I like to work a lot, and I think I need, you know, my wife helps me balance that. Like right now, like I already know, like, okay, we're gonna go, and it's good because I think that's the value of being in a relationship, is that you have people that help balance you. And sometimes I do move a little bit more on one edge of the spectrum, but you know, but it's a balance. My overall transition from community college to med school with family wasn't easy. I wouldn't say that, but the philosophy that we had was, well, it's never the right time to have a kid. So like my first child was born in medical school. And it's true. But now I look back and I'm like, I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old child, and it's amazing because like we watch Star Wars together, and like I'm a pretty young dad, and we're actually like, you know, we can, you know, like it's interesting and it's kind of cool. And a lot of my colleagues right now that are my age, they probably most of them don't have kids, or just having kids. So hard, yes. Fulfilling, yes. But also a balance. You know, you have to work through these things continuously, and you always have to be humble enough to know that you may have to reframe your or rework your strategy. So good questions. Yeah.
All righty. So since we don't have any other questions, we're gonna let everyone go.
Thank you all.
You guys could download. I'm gonna leave this open for the chat open, so you could download the links that we put up there. And so yeah, so we will see you guys next week, where we have the Dean of Admission from UC Riverside Medical School and Michigan State.
Wow, that's amazing, guys. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope that you guys are motivated, and you know, what I just hope is that I help provide a little bit of that change in narrative of what it means to be a community college student, and to empower you guys on your path, because you actually do represent part of the change that is needed in the healthcare system. So thank you all.
Thank you.